It's like a horror movie. We just came up with the plot of a horror movie.
I don't know if that would be that horrifying. It would be more like
For racists, I guess it would be.
yeah, but for everybody else,
Wow,
That's a great horror
it'd be
genre.
like porn.
Horror just for racists.
So you guys should have listened to the initial part of this conversation. Anyway, welcome to Let's Discuss. So I'm Chris, and I'm sitting here with...
Rylie.
And...
Gary.
Yeah! And we are going to be playing... let's enable aim assist, because I want this to be easy. Anyway, so we are playing The Evil Within 2. It's kind of a recent game. I'm kind of liking it. I've only played it a little bit so far, but we're playing The Evil Within 2, and we will be discussing horror.
That's why he was growling for 20 minutes.
It wasn't growling. I was being like a zombie.
No.
Oh, bummer. So yeah.
Zombies moan. They don't growl.
That just sounds like my dog. Okay, so
Actually, it did sound like his dog, folks.
so anyway, yeah, Evil Within. I played the first one. It was an okay game. It got kind of a bad rap because it was kind of dismissed as mechanically broken, and the narrative was really, really awful and all over the place. This second one is.
But other than that, it was superb.
Well, but other than that, it was.
Also, they spell Lily with only one L. What the hell? This game is shit.
Can we please refrain from cussing
Oh
because
my
it's
god, no.
annoying to edit out. Anyway, yeah. So right now, this is like a backstory to Sebastian, who's like trying to save his
Now, was
daughter.
this the
who
same
died in a
character
fire.
from the first game?
Yes.
Or,
He
okay.
gets to curse.
Well, I mean,
His
whenever,
daughter's
yeah,
dying.
his dialogue is really, really quiet.
Rylie.
Yeah. So anyway, before we get into like more Evil Within, whatever, because it's not really a huge point of this game or anything like that. I kind of want to talk about the sort of like origins of horror fiction, like horror books and that kind of thing. And obviously, horror has been written for a long, long time, but I would argue that one of the like kind of pinnacle classic horror writers would be H.P. Lovecraft. Yes.
Of the 20th century. I mean, you had Mary Shelley. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Frankenstein, but I see the appeal of it.
Right.
And,
then
you know, I
Edgar
think,
Allan Poe.
mhm.
Edgar
Yeah.
Allan Poe and the Gothic.
That's true.
I think Lovecraftian is more what inspires current horror.
Yeah,
But, I mean,
especially like
he was
sci-fi
built
horror.
on the ground of, like, these earlier people like Mary Shelley and Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
And, I'm blanking on the person that wrote Dracula.
Bram Stoker.
Yeah.
There's no Hawthorne as well.
He wrote horror?
Sort of. It was more like I remember we read one story by him where it was about a Puritan guy who went in the woods, which is scary for Puritans.
That's
But it was one of the stories where the narrator's unreliable. And, like you find out at the end, like maybe he was crazy the whole time, maybe he wasn't. You don't know.
What you just described to me was reminded me very much of a movie that I think you and I both kind of like quite a bit, and that is The Witch.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Yeah. So The Witch was kind of about, like a bunch of...
Government agents in black suits.
Yeah, I know, right? Like
It's Men in Black.
super obvious. Anyway, yeah, The Witch is really good. We'll talk about that later when we talk about like more movies and that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. When it comes to classic horror writers, my mind just kind of immediately goes to Lovecraft and all that stuff. What do you think makes good horror literature? And I figured that this would be better discussion for you guys because I don't do a lot of reading. Yeah, what makes good horror literature or good horror books?
I think, Riley tapped on something. You really can't have, like, the all-knowing narrator. Because,
Right.
like, part of horror is not knowing what comes next. So it really can't be done by a narrator writing in the past or one that is all-knowing. So you're kind of limited in what narrative styles you can use. But, a lot of it is just helping the reader feel the same uncertainty of their character and then putting them in the same situations you would see in a movie.
Yeah.
Right.
But you have to write it in a way that you can feel that same, like, fear and nervousness.
Yeah.
And Mary Shelley, I mean, like I said, I really didn't care for Frankenstein. She did a very good job of helping you feel the same way as Dr. Frankenstein.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually read the original Frankenstein.
You have not, you said?
No.
Yeah, I haven't either. We actually did kind of recently watch the original Frankenstein, like about a month or two ago.
Yeah.
It actually kind of holds up, like the old black and white one. Now, many aspects of it are dated, but the overall like concept,
structure.
yeah, the concept still holds up, and it's still pretty valid. But yeah, I mean, it was Lovecraft himself who said the greatest fear of mankind is the fear of the unknown, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to write good horror and be able to label everything and being like, here's what this is, here's what this is. A lot of horror is dependent on you don't know what's happening, or the main character doesn't know what's happening, and just kind of like this mystery dynamic.
It's like horror movies, you know, if it's a killer, you don't know who the killer is, and that's what's so frightening. Or if it's a monster, you don't know what the monster is.
Right.
And like they usually don't reveal those things until the third act.
Yeah, so Lovecraft, you guys, I mean, Rylie, you are familiar with a game coming out called The Sinking City, which is from the same studio that made the most recent Sherlock Holmes games.
Yeah, but he was awesome. They showed me.
Yeah, they were kind of doing like a making of the game and all that, and they're also making an officially licensed Call of Cthulhu game that's set to release in the next like year or so.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think they still have a release date or anything like that, but yeah, that's going to be a thing. But yeah, I figured that that will pave the way into horror video games, and I think that that's something that we can all contribute to here. Quick, off the top of your head, no thinking about it, give me the name of a horror video game that you like. Gary, go.
Alien Isolation.
Excellent statements, words. I don't know words. Rylie,
Selection.
what about you?
Resident Evil 7.
Good call.
That's the newest one, right?
Yes, Resident Evil 7. You don't play Resident Evil, you're such a noob. Oh my god, still cinematics are going on here. Anyway, yeah, the game did kind of do some forcing you into like getting you into the story, into the
and
hook.
you can't skip this.
You probably can, but I
mean,
well, I can't skip this part because it's interactive.
Yeah,
but still.
that's
Anyway, yeah, the Resident Evil is a franchise that I feel like is kind of important
I feel like that's the granddaddy of all video game horror. Like,
yeah,
everything is compared to that. At least the initial ones in 4.
Yeah, and when like the Resident Evil games really did kind of help to establish the horror genre of video games. You know, like it is the kind of standard that a lot of people were like, oh, remember. Am I moving right now? I don't remember. I'll tell you what, I'm just gonna skip this.
Like, I don't even know if were there really horror video games in the 2D era? Like, could they really be that scary?
Yeah. So actually, here's a fun fact. Resident Evil was actually kind of a ripoff of another game that was the same sort of dynamic. I forget what it's called. It was a Japanese game. It was never released in America, I don't think. But it was really bright and colorful and all that. But the concept was you played as like one of 6 or 7 people, and you find a big haunted mansion. I think zombies are there, either zombies or ghosts, and you deal with them. And yeah, it was mechanically very similar to the original Resident Evil. And it was when the people who made Resident Evil were like, why don't we do that? But let's take it a little bit more seriously. Let's give it a little bit more of a budget. Now, you know, it has not aged very well because when you look at the cinematics for the original Resident Evil, they're pretty loony. But they really did kind of set a standard. You know, when you ask a lot of like old-time gamers, you know, back when horror was still becoming a thing, you know, what's one of the scariest moments in video games? A lot of them will be like, oh, this thing in Resident Evil 1 or 2. You know, for the first one, it's the dogs. Because when there's a specific scene in the first Resident Evil where a bunch of zombie dogs just burst through the glass, and it's a pretty scary moment because it just kind of catches you totally off guard.
Title.
That is the title. Yeah, and then obviously Resident Evil led into Resident Evil 4, which we've already done a video about, so we won't talk about it like too much or anything like that, but it did kind of set a lot of standards for a lot of things. Well, one of the things that made the first Evil Within kind of a big deal when it was coming out was the fact that... where am I going? Oh, let's go over here. Anyway, when it was first coming out, one of the big hooks for it was that it was done by the same game director who made Resident Evil 4. That's why the beginning of The Evil Within is so thematically similar to Resident Evil 4. It's very much a sort of rural countryside with bear traps and, you know, quiet, spooky ambient music and, you know, crazy farm zombies and that kind of thing. But
zombies.
Yeah, farm
As
zombies.
opposed to city zombies.
Yeah, well, it's a different thing. What? Oh, hey.
Do you even know what you're doing?
It kind of just occurred to me now that the Arkham games have all had horror elements in them for like brief bits.
Especially Scarecrow.
Yeah, the Scarecrow bits in the Arkham Asylum, they prey on like the fears that Bruce Wayne would have, but especially one part, it makes you think your Xbox has glitched and preying on the fears of
PT did that.
every gamer that your system breaks.
Yeah. You're right. So Arkham Asylum was like one of the first games to do that. Yeah, PT, which was the playable teaser for the now canceled.
That's what it stands for. I never knew what that stood for.
Oh yeah. So there you go.
I can die happy.
Anyway, so the playable teaser for Silent Hills, which is now canceled. At one point in the game, in order to progress, you have to like do a thing which makes what looks like just an error screen for your PlayStation come up, and it does all sorts of weird game-changing stuff. That was kind of borrowed from Arkham Asylum. I have a proposal for you, Gary. Actually, before we get into over there, let's talk about PT. Because Rylie, you were pretty into PT when it was a thing, right?
I did, yeah. It was probably
Trust that cat.
the first sort of horror game that I actually played.
Yeah.
And yeah, I liked it a lot. I was really sad when I found out they were not going to make it. But I was glad that we still got to keep the trailer or the teaser on our PS4.
Yeah.
Because we would like invite people over and make them play it and scare the shit out of them. But then something went wrong with our PS4 and we had to get a new one and we couldn't re-download it because they won't let you re-download it.
Yep. Yeah, they deleted it from their servers. So you can't download it again.
But yeah, I'm really into walking simulator horror. Like,
thanks, kitty.
Resident Evil 7 was in a lot of ways kind of a walking simulator. Now it did become a lot more action heavy later on.
Because I'm not very good at shooting. I tend to panic and press a bunch of buttons. When we played RE7, I kept accidentally healing myself when I didn't need to because I would just like clamp down on the controller and press the bumpers and freak out.
Yeah,
I've gotten a little better, but yeah.
Yeah, Resident Evil 7 is one of those. It was a really good game, and it was actually a game from this year. It was back from early January, so it's one of the more recent games that was a thing. We touched on this a little bit in our first-person shooter video, but Gary, what are your feelings on a little video game called BioShock?
Wow, BioShock. Classic.
Where am I supposed to go?
Really the first half of the game is really the horror, and then it becomes more of a standard shooter.
Yeah.
But like the horror elements that it introduced really, they were very visceral and they really understood what scares people. And that's like, they show you something scary and then they hide it very often or they disguise it.
Right.
And then it appears again. Like, it's going to happen, but you don't know when. And like, there were a few points, like, we talked about this in our video, where you see the doctor like butchering somebody and then he pops out of the meat locker.
Yeah, some really good jump scares.
There's a part where like there's a bunch of loot on the floor and you go and get it and a bunch of guys appear around you when all the lights turn off. So like, they're showing you something and then redirecting your attention. And I think that's a really good visceral scare and it works even if you know it's going to happen.
Yeah, have you guys heard about the theory that horror and comedy are actually very closely related because they're built upon the same principle, which is subversion? So with comedy, it's supposed to be like you're expecting a certain thing and then you get a different payoff, and that's what makes it funny. A similar thing can kind of be said about horror, and that's that you are expecting one thing and then you get another thing, in place, like the jump scare or something like that. Or the sense of tension and build up.
Right.
Comedy and horror are very, very
You're surprised by
related.
something. You're surprised by the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. And they have different goals. Obviously one is to make you laugh, and the other one is supposed to scare you. But arguably one of the reasons why people really engage in horror is because they like to be scared. It's fun for them.
For like a romantic movie or an action movie, they're going to get together. The good guy's going to win. So you're not surprised by the result, but you cheer them on anyway.
Right.
So like, right.
So if we want to get to like sort of subversive nature of horror and comedy, let's kind of go into something that is kind of about both of those, and that is the Scream movies. Now, Gary, you are pretty familiar with those, aren't you?
I'm familiar with the first three, and I'm a big fan of the first two.
Yeah.
I really like that both the first two are parodies of themselves. Like the first Scream is very much a parody of a horror movie, and I mean, it doesn't really hide this fact. I mean, they have a movie nerd in the movie telling everybody what's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's rules.
Yeah.
And the movie follows those rules. It unabashedly does follow those rules until the very end. And then the second one is great because it continues on with those rules of a horror movie, but adds in rules of a sequel.
Yeah.
And once again, there's a very obvious part of the movie where, they're explaining sequels to you under the guise of a film studies course. And then the third one tries to set rules for a trilogy, and I think it did actually like do a good job of like being the third part of a trilogy. Like it wasn't just a sequel. I think the movie suffered from other problems. I will say that Carrie Fisher's role in that movie is one of my favorite in-jokes of all time. She makes a joke that she was up for the part of Princess Leia in Star Wars, but who got it? The girl that slept with George Lucas.
Oh my god.
And it's funny because it's Carrie Fisher saying that.
Right. Which, whom, rest in peace, Carrie Fisher, and world is a sadder place without her,
But yeah, so like, I mean, I think the movies did a very good job of having comedic elements while still being a horror movie and also making fun of themselves. Which I think that's so hard to do for a movie.
And you never saw the fourth one, right?
No.
From what I understand, the fourth one was kind of like what you were describing, where it was meant to be sort of a self-aware, almost parody of horror movies, but instead of being about like a single horror movie or a sequel to a horror movie or the trilogy of a horror film. It's supposed to be about the horror franchises that won't die, and that's what Scream 4 was supposed to be like a parody of.
That makes sense.
It's supposed to be, the whole
Saw and
Paranormal Activity and all that stuff. Yeah.
That series should go away.
Right. I never saw it, but that's apparently what that was supposed to be.
I think I even own it. I just never got around to watching it.
I heard it was okay.
It was originally going to launch a new trilogy, and then they decided. I guess they kind of looked at what it was about.
The
and
ones behind his head kind of look like rose petals.
I think that's actually on purpose.
Oh.
Yeah. Is that supposed to be a skull?
What is this, American Beauty?
A movie which is so much more poignant now.
Oh, I know. I'm like, wow.
That's definitely
okay.
a skull.
Now it is a horror movie. All right.
But anyway, Scream. When it comes to like subversive, sort of self-aware, almost parodies of horror movies, I want to talk about two. The first one is kind of an obvious one. It's kind of a free throw. We've all seen it, and that's Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Oh my
We've
god.
all seen that. Really?
Yes.
Alan Tudyk.
We have. I mean, but
yeah, right.
Yeah,
I've seen
so
that.
I meant like the audience.
I think it actually has a cult following.
Yeah, and it
really,
was
really
on
does.
Netflix for a long time, so
I'm
a lot of people
pretty
had
sure
the
it's still on
opportunity.
there.
It is.
As far as I know, it still is. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, check it out if you haven't seen it, guys. If it's still on Netflix.
Don't watch the trailer for it.
Because it ruins a lot of the good parts.
Really?
Yeah, it gives away like all the funny
parts.
parts.
Been out for a while.
Yeah, all of the deaths that are in the movie, pretty much they show off in the trailer.
Dude, what the hell?
So it is still, it's still fun and it's still like there, but if you watch the trailer for it, it kind of gives away a lot of moments of it.
Yeah, it was a very poorly made trailer.
Which, I mean, to be honest though, like that was a good way to sell the movie, because as soon as we saw it, we were like, I want to watch that movie now.
Yeah,
Right.
You know what I mean?
They probably could have done that by showing just one or two of the deaths.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a great, like, they really hit the nail on the head with, like you said, just making fun of horror movies and the ridiculousness that, like, the crazy guys out in the woods have to be murderers.
Right. I will kind of, like, maybe make the point that Tucker and Dale versus Evil is more of a comedy with a horror skin on it.
It's not
although
very scary.
the trailer made it seem more like a horror with comedic elements.
Well, and even the first 5 minutes of the movie makes it look like this is going to be a horror movie, and then like 5 minutes after that, it becomes a comedy.
It's a lighthearted comedy
Yeah.
with some gruesome deaths.
I would say Cabin in the Woods does a better job of being self-aware and also scary.
And that leads me into the next thing, which is I think that Cabin in the Woods is like Tucker and Dale versus Evil in that it is a subversive, self-aware horror movie, but is also actually a horror movie and is a lot better written, in my opinion. Now, Gary, you still haven't seen that, have you?
No, but I mean, I wonder if that's just Josh Whedon's influence, because I mean, from what I hear, Buffy had some of those same
Yeah. It's
tones.
you can definitely see a lot of the same characteristics between Buffy and Cabin in the Woods. There are very, very, very similar plots and plot elements and tropes and that kind of thing. But
now, was he involved with the original Buffy movie in any way, or just the TV series?
I want to say he actually got writing credit for it.
Okay.
But I don't want to be wrong about that. I honestly do not remember.
Because that was also a movie that it had some jokes. It had some good one-liners.
Yeah. I know that...
And like the ridiculousness of like a blonde teenage girl, being the one to defeat like the evil vampires.
Right. From what I understand, though, Cabin in the Woods actually had more influence from Drew Goddard, who would go on to make all of the Netflix Marvel shows, like Daredevil and Jessica Jones. Well, not Jessica Jones, more Daredevil, but...
Wow, because really, I mean, I don't... Like, Jessica Jones, I don't think a lot of people necessarily realize that's horror.
Yeah, it's a...
Like, that's straight up horror.
Yeah. We still haven't even finished like the last few episodes of it.
There are like 3 episodes left.
Trust me, like get to like the last couple episodes and like as bad as it's been, like it gets worse.
Oh.
But like it's like it just preys on those like visceral fears, especially that women have.
Right.
That and that's what Kilgrave's power is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, to me, he's one of the scariest villains.
Yeah, he's one of the realest villains in the entire Marvel universe.
Probably.
Like not just the Marvel TV shows, but like the Marvel Cinematic Universe too. Oh,
the thing with him too is like I would be really intrigued if you could have a superhero with that power. And it would just be like, are they a good person or are they a bad person?
Yeah.
And how are they? Because that power could be really used for good also.
Right.
Like Professor Xavier in X-Men basically has that same power.
Right.
Yeah.
And he uses it for good.
So does if you recall correctly, it's a bad movie, so I would not be surprised if you forgot. But X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Oh my God.
Oh
yeah. You remember how Wolverine's girlfriend and that?
Yeah, she just
movie,
has to touch you and then she can tell you.
Yeah. Similar kind of thing. Yeah, she touches them and then she can just tell them to do things and then they'll do it. Anyway, I kind of want to go back to video games for a minute because I want to talk about a couple of video games that are kind of remembered for their horror elements, but like are straight up horror games, whether people really want to like say so or not. And the first one is one that you all know about, Gary. Metroid Fusion.
Oh yeah.
Metroid Fusion is a horror game.
Yeah, the first time you play it, it's nothing but a horror game. You feel powerless. The Sax XAX, it is 100% just this villain that you can't top. It's like the Alien or Jason. Like you can't fight it.
Yeah, you're always on the run.
And you're always concerned it's going to pop around the corner. Mm. And they do a really good job of each time you encounter it, it's more and more involved. The first few times you see it, you can just hide.
Right.
But the last 2 or 3 times, you actually have to escape from it the same way that you would in like a horror movie.
Yeah. It's not until like the very end of the game that you actually have to fight it.
Like, and they do a great job. Like, you can't even damage it.
Yeah.
Until the very end of the game.
And the other thing that I found really interesting about it, well, not really interesting. Well, just there are other like flavorings and things like that make it very clearly a horror game. To this day, one of the moments that has like scared me or just like kind of made me feel unsettled more than a lot of other things in video games was in Metroid Fusion. You were like doing a thing, you were going toward a thing, and then you're riding an elevator, upward, and then the elevator just stops.
And the power cuts out, I think. Right?
Yeah, and the power goes out, and then you just have to deal with it. And it didn't make you think that it was going to happen. It just happened. So I remember when it happened, I was like, what am I supposed to do right now?
Yeah.
And I was actually kind of like freaking out because I didn't want to die. And that was really, really good horror. The other one that I want to talk about, though, is horror that... Okay. So I have to figure out how to frame this discussion.
Can I
here.
jump in here real quick?
Yes.
Just real quick, another series that I think did horror right in at least 2 of the games, Gears of War. They had very much the third acts in both 1 and 2. They were very spooky, scary, didn't know what was around the corner. I think the first one did a better job of it by a great margin. And it really interrupted kind of a run and gun, just kill everything shooter.
Yeah.
Making you think like around the corner there's going to be some big bad guy.
Sure, yeah.
But, all right, back to yours.
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like one of the sort of common tropes that people like to associate with horror is that horror has to be R-rated. It has to be for adults. You know, it's hard to make horror without making it,
Bloody.
or like really, really, really spooky. And I think that to a certain degree, you can do horror without necessarily making it, geared towards someone other than kids. For example, Luigi's Mansion
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
is a horror game because, like, think about it. Luigi's Mansion is essentially Resident Evil, but instead of, like Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine, you are Luigi. And instead of zombies, you're dealing with ghosts.
Right.
But it's built upon this idea of
You're
uncertainty,
exploring a mansion.
of darkness, of loneliness, of fear, and all that. It's just that it presents it in a way that is much, much, much more kid-friendly.
Well, and that's something Limbo does. Like, there's
Oh,
gruesome
yeah.
deaths, but there's no blood. And the whole thing is you're a little kid looking for their sister, I believe.
Yeah.
And then it's really terrifying in that, the ending, if you really think about it, is very terrifying. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but if you really think about it, it's terrifying.
I do like this moment that you guys will see here.
Oh yeah, I think I remember this part.
It's good ad placement by Target, really.
Hey, cool. No, they're
Yeah, you remember how I came from, like, a hallway, and I turn around and there's this wall here with a camera pointed at me?
Oh yeah. This reminds me of that.
Arkham Knight did a lot of
Fear
similar
game.
things to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
What was that game that we played where it was like you open a door and then you go through the same door again and it's a totally different hallway?
Oh, Layers of Fear.
Layers of Fear. Yeah, like that was the whole
Oh, wow.
game.
Yeah, I know, right? That catches you off guard.
But seriously, good product placement.
Layers of Fear was another walking simulator that the idea of like madness of just like going behind a door and then having it be like a completely different room on the other side and all this other stuff. It got kind of tired and played
Yeah,
out.
like it was kind of creepy when it happened.
Oh hey,
a few
what does that photo
times.
look like?
Oh, man, he can develop pictures really fast.
I know, right? Quick little side note. I noticed.
Oh shit!
Hey, girl.
I mean, crap.
Oh, wow. Pizza cup.
Yeah.
Run away.
Sprint.
I am sprinting. He's just a very slow runner.
Dude, you don't die.
No, yeah, it'll be fine.
Oh,
It's a flesh.
Come back here, I'll bite your kneecaps off. There we go. All right.
Oh, that
Yeah,
door will
'cause that door's-
stop him.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, here we go. All right. We were. You also brought up a game earlier that we did not touch on yet, and that is Alien Isolation.
Okay.
What worked about Alien Isolation?
Well, I mean, the control scheme was very intuitive. It was slightly different than Last of Us, which was a similar game, so it took me some getting used to. But also, you always felt this presence, like there was something around the corner. So you're always on edge a little bit, and the fact that when you finally do run into the alien, you are 100% powerless.
Yeah.
Which, I didn't get a chance to play too far into the game. I'm told they eventually get rid of that. Like, you actually can stand toe-to-toe, which is important for a video game. Doesn't necessarily need to be there in a movie, but in a video game,
Right.
you can't go the whole game without being able to do something.
Yeah, I feel like that was a problem with Outlast.
yeah.
But then there's also other enemies in Alien Isolation which have the same effect. there's androids that
God,
initially very difficult, but I'm told you eventually can take them out.
Oh.
But once again, it's just other enemy that you have to learn to deal with, and it's a very like they're more the traditional, they walk slow, but they still somehow catch you kind of enemy that was so common during the 80s.
Yeah. One thing that a lot of people don't really think about, but is totally a thing, is that the first Terminator movie is totally a horror movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Slow, unstoppable monster.
I gotta do this or I'm gonna die. Okay, I think we're good. Yeah, and just, constantly being, like, stalked by it and feeling powerless against it and, all this other stuff.
And they gradually do more damage to it, like,
How?
just like in a horror movie.
Yeah. Let's move on from there, then. Let's talk about something that, sorry, what were you saying? How, what?
Oh, sorry. It looked like he was limping because he got stabbed in the chest. And I was just confused.
I mean, he might have been, but I don't know. And I think from this point on, it's just like an open world kind of thing, so I don't need to like necessarily go anywhere or do anything. I just kind of need to mess around. Anyway, so let's talk about sort of a subgenre of horror that I especially like, you as well, Gary, and that's science fiction horror.
Mm-hmm.
So like the Terminator's a horror movie,
Yeah.
And I would argue that it's hard to frame the Terminator in any other way other than as science fiction.
Yeah.
I feel like the huh?
Robots.
Yeah, the plot and the execution.
Future, time travel. I mean,
Yeah.
even the original story that that was borrowed from
Okay, cool.
was classified as science fiction, and it's blatantly a rip. Well, they settled a lawsuit that alleged it was a ripoff of, I believe it was a Twilight Zone episode.
Oh.
I think you told me about
And
this.
it was the same basic principle, like an android went back in time. It's something they called it like the glass hand.
Mm-hmm.
An android went back in time.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I mean, there was some inspiration from sci-fi elements for sure. That's the polite way to put it.
Right.
So I'm not going to get sued way to put it.
Yeah. So I feel like, science fiction horror movies are really the best when they embrace both the science fiction and the horror.
Yeah.
Another great example is just Alien. Like the original Alien movie, you can't really take the idea of Alien and just put it into a modern day setting or something like that. It doesn't quite work the same. It's dependent on exploring a new world and being
Right.
stalked by this like new
And to be
extraterrestrial
on the
threat.
confines of you could theoretically.
You can change the setting to something else, but the dynamic of where the alien comes from, you can't have it as anything other than science fiction.
Yeah. Cool, because even if you put it on like a nuclear missile sub or something,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be like a monster that they just discovered. Like
Yeah,
you could
yeah.
maybe make it a monster movie, but would it have the same effect? I mean, I
Right.
doubt it.
Right.
And part of the fear of Alien is the android.
Yeah.
Right.
How are you going to have that without the science fiction?
Fun fact: the idea of the android Ash, as he was in the first movie, was not actually Ridley Scott's idea. It was Walter Hill's idea, which was one of the like kind of co-writers, producers of the movies. It wasn't the android was not actually a Ridley Scott idea, which is interesting. There's another science fiction horror movie that I'm especially fond of. We actually talked about it a little bit in our video where we discussed alien stuff, and that is The Thing.
Oh,
Ooh,
yeah.
classic.
The thing is so good.
Yeah,
One quick note: Alien
yeah,
is my favorite horror movie.
yeah. It's a good one. When I was watching a video that was talking about the 5 like best horror movies of all time, the video was interesting in the way it was framed because it was like, listen, we can just do this, but like everybody knows that the 5 best horror movies of all time are Alien, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho, a couple of other ones that I'm just like forgetting off the top of my head now. And they were like, but yeah, so like just making another list like this would be redundant. So instead, let's make a list of movies that would be sufficient replacements for these movies if in some alternate universe these movies did not exist.
Right.
So in place of like Alien, for example, they have The Descent. And in place of Psycho, they had, I think the movie was called Voyeur or something like that. Anyway, or the voyeurism or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was kind of an interesting thing. But anyway, yeah, The Thing. The Thing is super duper good. Rylie, do you want to talk about The Thing a little bit?
Sure. That movie is scary for me personally because the dog in the beginning, we have a dog that looks almost exactly like that dog.
Annie puppy.
Yes.
She's a husky.
Every dog
We
is a
should
puppy.
totally, for Halloween next year, dress her up as the thing. Like, make weird little tendril arms that can come off of her back. But yeah, I really liked the thing.
That was so Resident Evil-esque.
Kidman.
What?
That monster.
Oh.
Yeah, that was kind of designed with this sort of idea of Resident Evil 4 in mind.
Yeah.
Again, you can see, like, when they made the first Evil Within, and by extension this one, like, the guy who was the game director behind Resident Evil 4, definitely the same guy here. But anyway, yeah, the thing is really, really good. One of the things that it makes, the thing so good is its reliance on practical effects and, by extension, body horror of those practical effects.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you take body horror, that is to say that like something about the human body is like distorted or perverted or like ripped apart or something like that, generally when you use practical effects to do that, it has much more of a visceral sort of feel to it, and it has a lot more weight to it. Whenever you just use CGI or animation of any kind with that, it loses something. That's kind of something that went wrong, in my opinion, with the remake or the prequel to The Thing that came out of like 2010 or something like that. It's a bad movie. Not a bad, terrible movie, just like nothing compared to the legacy of the first, and really, really disappointing.
It's one of those like, should you even make it?
Yeah,
if you can't, at least give it a go.
Right. But
another sci-fi horror movie that I really like is a movie called Pandorum.
yes,
It's the plot is basically, they're on a giant ship that has thousands and thousands of people on it. They're traveling to another habitable planet.
Oh, hold
and
on.
something goes wrong.
Let me cut you off here for real quickly for a second. Hey, people watching this video, have you seen Passengers? It's basically the movie Passengers, except it's like actually scary.
Instead of just creepy.
Yeah, instead of just like dumb and awful.
And by the way, okay, spoilers for Passengers. I totally called that he woke her up intentionally.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen the movie, but
You just happen to wake up the most gorgeous girl on the ship yet. Or she just happens to be the one to wake up. I mean,
Right, yeah.
Creeper.
Yeah.
But it's actually very similar to a Robert Heinlein novel. It was the same basic concept. Generational ship. Something went wrong with like the leadership, and people forgot what they were on, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And
So like Wally.
Yeah. So I mean, it's worth the watch. It's nothing special. I always just, I don't know, it's one of those movies I like for some reason that I can't really explain.
Pandorum, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like the twist, and I thought it was really well done.
Pandorum is actually a decently executed movie. It's not a great movie. It's not any kind of like instant classic or anything like that. But it's a fun, it's a fun, relatively well put together film. For sort of a frame of reference, it was written and directed, and I think even produced by the same guy who made all the most recent Resident Evil movies. So imagine kind of like Resident Evil in space a little bit. That's kind of like Pandorum.
Yeah.
The first Resident Evil especially. Like the first Resident Evil movie was not that bad. It was actually okay.
Yeah, it was really, there was a franchise that had nowhere to go but up, and then it found a way down. The second one was bad, I'm sorry.
The second one was a bad movie. The third one is even worse. And then after that, they were like, you know what, whatever, let's just have fun with this.
Then the fourth one was a little bit better, but still nothing special. Like, I guess the fourth one wasn't bad the way that the third one was.
Yeah. But anyway, the Resident Evil movies, let's get away from those. Let's talk about more modern horror movies. And with that, I kind of want to talk about, we were talking about movies from earlier this year. I want to talk about what is the best horror movie of the year, fight me, and that is Get Out.
Woo!
So, Gary, you have not seen that movie, have you?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I had a kid.
Right, yeah.
But, Rylie, you've seen Get Out.
Yes.
And Get Out is pretty damn good. You want to talk about Get Out a little bit?
Sure. If you suffer from secondhand embarrassment, you're not gonna like this movie. Because it's just like, hi, we're gonna make you feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah, the thing that makes Get Out just so good. Again, I legitimately believe it's the best horror movie of the year and is one of the best movies of the year. Is the fact that it takes the horror shtick, puts subversion into it. It counters your expectations, which is what we were talking about earlier. And then on top of that too, it has like modern social relevance.
Yeah.
It is predicate. It is dependent on the idea of the main character is a black man. And to have the movie be anything other than that, it would be a different movie. So that's the thing. Not only is it a great, well-executed, well-written, well-developed movie that subverts your expectations and deals with horror really, really well, it has a lot of modern social significance that really just can't go unnoticed. It's a great movie. It really, really is. Gary, you need to watch that movie.
I will at some point. Another modern movie that, horror movie that also had like social significance. I think it was last year. It Follows.
Oh, It Follows was okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was commentary on sexual promiscuity and whatnot. And I still think the end of that movie should have been her having sex with an astronaut just before he went to Mars, and then the movie could have ended with like the demon on Mars.
Oh, yeah.
Or the demon, like, desperately trying to climb up a building to get to Mars.
Right.
Yeah.
And, like, that's how you beat it. Like, you suck it on another planet.
Yeah, one of the problems for me with It Follows was the fact that it had a really, really good idea and a really good premise, but I feel like it kind of got lost on the fact that what do you do with it after a certain point?
Yeah.
Once...
Ran out of room.
Yeah. Because all it is just kind of like, the same thing repeating over and over and over again. And if you just had this sort of like cliched ending of like, oh, and then she dies, and then the next guy dies, and blah, 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 and it's just kind of like, that's nothing new. So they just kind of like end it with, well, this is what it is now, and it wasn't a good ending for me. It didn't work. I didn't feel like it actually concluded anything, and it didn't have that subversion that we were talking about.
And I think I've never seen any of the Final Destination movies other than the first.
Yeah.
And I hated the ending because basically it was like, oh, it's still there. Like, we didn't defeat it. Like, they thought they defeated it, but it's just like, nope, it's eventually going to kill us. Credits.
A recent modern horror movie that also makes a social commentary, I guess, would be The Babadook on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of a metaphor for dealing with depression.
Yeah, and like post-traumatic stress syndrome and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't remember The Babadook very, very well, but that is another one that was pretty relevant. Because it's predicated on the idea that this monster comes from your feelings of like isolation and sadness. That the main character has with her son. Have you seen that movie, Gary?
No, but I remember there's an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode when I was a kid where basically it was like your fear like generated things that made you even more afraid, and like it would use your fear against you.
Isn't that kind of like what It did?
Yeah.
The idea of It was that, the monster is built on your fear and all that stuff. We did see
that.
Yeah, we did see the new It movie. I did not love it. And Rylie, you didn't really love it that much either, right?
No, I don't know.
But I think
something about
the core problem, I think, is what was so frightening about it was in the book, and I think in the original movie, was they had dealt with this before, and they were facing the fear of dealing with it again. And they removed that from the new one.
Yeah, in the new one, they're just focusing on them as kids. There's not the
but so much of the fear is like the not again aspect of like, I thought we were past this.
Right.
Like, they're no longer these bright-eyed kids. They're just like middle-aged adults that have to deal with it also. And like, that was there's a reason Stephen King wrote it that way. Is like, that's part of the fear. Is that it's like this endless battle they'll face.
Yeah, and they also changed a lot of like sort of plot arcs and character arcs for the movie that kind of just made it another like by the books horror movie, which is kind of like what killed it for me. Like as a whole, the new It movie was really just kind of a generic as heck horror movie, and that doesn't really do anything.
It was more of a product of a successful marketing campaign than
yeah, I would agree with that.
When I walked out of it,
brilliant marketing.
I seriously
sold
thought,
really well.
that like if I'd gone into the movie knowing nothing about it, not knowing the name of it, not knowing the characters' names, and like Pennywise the Clown was not in it, I wouldn't have known it was a Stephen King movie. I wouldn't have known it was it because it was so generic, and they changed so much about the characters, like really important things. They're gonna making the second movie when they're adults that much more difficult and weird that I don't even know if I want to see the second one.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't love the first one. They did change some things. I would argue for the better. Yeah, like the weird child
orgy.
Underground sewer child orgy. They took that out for the movie for the wiser. Now, where that scene comes from in the book kind of has a point, and that's the idea was that the reason why the kids did that was because they thought that was sort of the road to being an adult, that was the thing that made them adults. And the whole thing was that was wrong, and that's why they had to deal with that fear later on as they were adults. But that's how they felt like they had beaten it as they were kids, and that's what made them move on and live with the rest of their lives. And again, the big thing there is that was wrong. That did not actually cure their fear. That did not make them adults. I get that, but it didn't need to be in there. It could have just been written out, and it was the
there were other ways to do it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, if as a kid I fought like a supernatural being, I would move. As soon as I turned 18.
Well, the whole thing is that there's something about the town that keeps people there.
Okay, I can't remember that, but yeah, I guess that's legit. We're John.
As a callback to Lovecraft and the whole Cthulhu thing, wasn't the idea of it or Pennywise or whatever kind of like this extra dimensional?
Yeah. There was this
horror?
Weird cosmic monster kind of thing. I read the book
in the book at least, yeah.
Right before the movie came out, and those parts were interesting. I don't know if they really landed as well as they could have.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. The monster, it is supposed to be some sort of kind of alien almost that found a home on Earth and discovered it could feed on children's fears pretty easily.
Yeah. And with that, actually, we're kind of coming up on an hour here. We've probably only got we're probably at the 45, 50 minute mark here. So let's kind of wrap up with sort of classic horror movies and classic horror movies. When it comes to classic horror movies, the ones from the pinnacle ones from the 70s and the 80s, what are the first ones that come to mind for you guys?
Halloween, Friday the 13th. Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, I mean, those are pretty much.
So why do you think that those movies have this sort of impact or significance that they have?
I don't know.
Well, they're tied to, they're tied to killing immoral activities, teenagers having sex.
And drugs. And...
Yeah, so they're very much they prey off our, cultural fears. Doing drugs won't just ruin my life, it's going to get me killed. Or premarital sex won't just, ruin my life, it's going to get me killed.
Well, but even apart from, the sort of themes and the elements, I would argue that the sort of ways that the movies were directed and made were very, very relevant toward filmmaking as a whole. You know what I mean? I'm having trouble coming up with very specific examples here. But there are a lot of things that horror movies did that kind of became staples of cinema in general. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why a lot of those classic movies really stick with you. The idea of dissociative disorder as something that could be scary was a big thing in Psycho. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Before then, it wasn't really a thing.
Which is honestly kind of awful because real people have that and suffer from that and aren't murderers. So
I think another movie that it doesn't prey on those, and I think it was a '90s horror movie, but Misery. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, we actually just recently watched that.
Did we?
Yeah, that's the one where the writer gets kidnapped by Kathy Bates.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's so
weird.
I mean obviously it's Stephen King writing about his weird fans and what they could potentially do.
Yeah.
Because you're that famous, you got some weirdos that like write to you and stalk you, and so and it preys on like basic fears of like your fans thinking that they get to decide what to do with you.
Yeah.
And, like they should dictate what you do with your characters. And not that you're an artist with your own free will.
Right. That's one of the things that made Stephen King like successful at writing, was that rather than come up with like original, unique characters, for a lot of his stories, he was just kind of like, let's make this story about myself.
Well,
you know what I mean?
And also think about almost all of his characters are set in Maine.
Yeah.
He just wants to look out the window like, it's a dark and dreary day.
But yeah, like the main character in Misery, like one of the characters in It is obviously Stephen King. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like a bunch of other things too, which no like hate or anything toward the guy, but it just kind of
it's like write what you know. So
you
know yourself.
Yep, for sure.
You know Maine.
Yeah.
Like because very few stories can't be written in Maine that like you can find some justification like
right. One of the more recent Stephen King movies, it's kind of a newer one that you can find on Netflix now because it's a Netflix exclusive. It was actually not too bad. Was Gerald's Game.
Oh yeah.
That was actually a decent flick. The guy who directed some other movies that weren't terrible. They were still kind of finding themselves.
High praise, guys. Not terrible.
Yeah. Like one of the movies that he did was Oculus. Oculus was a really well-directed movie. It was a really, really pretty, well put-together film. The only thing that held it back was the fact that it didn't have a very unique plot development or character development. So it was really just more the script, which I don't think he wrote. I'm pretty sure he just directed it. So he's a good director. He really, really is. And I think that he even actually did the script draft for the film adaptation for Gerald's Game. I guess he had been wanting to do that for years. But anyway, like I said, we're actually coming up on the final stretch here. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about in terms of horror?
Well, it's just really poor military strategy they're using here. I'm just gonna put that out there. Like, put everyone on one building and just fortify it. Instead, it's like, hey, let's spread out.
Yeah,
Same thing they did in World War Z, which actually a pretty good horror novel. It's based on the zombie apocalypse that nearly destroys the world. Mm-hmm. It's written as like a fictional account from people's perspective throughout the world.
Yeah.
It's worth the read.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing special, but worth the read.
Right. I didn't even think the movie adaptation was that terrible. One of the problems with it...
The ending, horrible.
Which part?
The fact that they like defeat they basically find an I win button.
Yeah. I will agree with you. Now, on one hand, that's kind of a gutsy move. Like, they took a chance writing that. They took a chance doing that, and in a way, that's commendable. But yeah, I don't think it worked. I don't think that it was like, oh yeah, that's really clever. It was kind of like, that's what you came up with?
Words of Bo Burnham, original does not mean good.
The book was really detailed in... like 2/3 of the book was about them retaking the world and the psychological toll that had on people. Mm-hmm. Like people would fight, like for example, for the United States, they got pushed all the way back to like the Pacific coast, and then they had pushed all the way back east to retake the United States from the zombies. And one guy fought all the way from Sacramento, or like somewhere in California, I can't remember the exact place, to Gary, Indiana. He's just perfectly regular. But as soon as he saw his old house, he killed himself. And that was like his way to win, was to get home. And it was like all these little psychological things about like how different people were after this. And instead, they just basically did the first third of the book and then created an I win button that really didn't make all that much sense.
Yeah. The biggest problem with the movie was the fact that it was such a far cry from the book. Now, mechanically, though, and like objectively as a movie, it's not terrible. Like, I enjoyed watching it, and heck, I even watched it a few times after that, even.
I mean, I enjoyed it until the end. If they had chosen to end it even slightly differently, like, I would have preferred them to blatantly set it up for a sequel.
Well, and even then, the I win button was badly written, but the execution for that final scene in the CDC Center was actually relatively well done.
Yeah,
like the
filming was good.
And just the directing, like the overall construction of the third act was actually pretty good, except for that I win button in the script. The writing there. But yeah, I think that we're coming up on the end here. Riley, what about all the James Wan movies?
Oh, The Conjuring?
Like The Conjuring and like the sort of Annabelle universe and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah. God. The first Annabelle movie is so cookie cutter generic.
Yeah.
But I would honestly recommend seeing the second one. The second one is okay.
Yeah, it's good.
I like both the Conjuring movies. I honestly also like the second one better than that one too.
I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I do think The Conjuring 2 is a better film than The Conjuring.
Did it get a little better into like character development and I don't know.
They do the overall like setup, the plot construction, and the character development and all that. Yeah, is better in the second one than it is in the first one. But yeah, I think that we're going to need to actually wrap it up here. So yeah, thank you everybody for watching. If you want to see more videos of us just hanging out playing video games and talking about nerdy pop culture stuff and all that, go ahead and throw this a like and subscribe to the channel. So yeah, thank you everybody again for watching. We'll see you next time on Let's Discuss. My name is Chris.
I'm Riley.
And I'm Gary, and next week or next video should be action movies. So if you're interested in that,
yeah,
keep checking back.
Yeah, we'll do that. So yeah, thanks for watching.